as the Board of Education in preparation for our budget. This is our second budget meeting. We're going to hear tonight from our directors and the principals, the building principals, what makes up their numbers. And this is how we conduct our budget workshops. We go through their budget worksheets, their budget presentation, and feel free to ask questions of them. I know you can't do line by line changes in our budget, but we want you to better understand the numbers and where they come from and what makes up these numbers and how they're developed and how we go about analyzing these numbers. And we do have citizens' comments, so not that we have a whole lot of citizens, but if the citizens do have questions, we have a lot to get through tonight, so I would like to limit those comments to 3 minutes. You state your name and your address, and please limit the comments to 3 minutes. Okay, Rob, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate that. We're happy to be here as a Board of Finance. Last year, we made some changes to the process that we take, and we had joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen. And it allowed us to hear by department their budget buildups. And actually became we felt a more efficient process for us, because then when we delved deeper into the budgets, we got to hear from those that actually created the budgets within their department. Following that, there was a recommendation to have a joint meeting tonight. We recognize it can't cover every one of your meetings, and all of us have so many meetings and full-time, most of us full-time day jobs. So we are volunteers as well for the town. But I think the reach out, at least last year, we found to be very beneficial. So we'll see and evaluate how it goes tonight and how this year goes. As is the case in most budgets, right? It's about focusing on the details. It's about cost controls, of course. It's about prioritization. I mean, and that's not just a school. I'm just speaking more in general, right? There's so much to do in the town. We can't possibly do it all. And really, even if we had unlimited funding, just having the people to do it all. So in areas where funding is tighter, we need to make choices and hard decisions. And that's all what you all have been doing year over year as you build up your budget. So this year is no different. Little challenging because it's a reval year as well. So those of you who lived in town, your property values went up, which is a good thing. It really is. It might shock some people to see a big number. The mill rate will be normalized off of that number, meaning we'll start from a new base, of course, but it just makes it a little bit more of a challenging year. And that was pretty much it, Kathleen. I just wanted to thank everyone. I understand the amount of time commitment to pull the budgets together. So I wanted to thank everybody in advance for their time commitment to build it up. And that's the whole key to it, to build it up by a department to then be able to have the full budget. So thank you very much.
At this point, we'll take some citizens' comments. Anybody on Zoom have a citizen's comment at this point? Hearing none, we'll move on to Superintendent Smith to the introduction of the budget.
All right, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here with both boards. I get to go to both of your meetings, so I understand the struggles on both sides of the fence. I want you to know that when we put this budget together, it started off as a zero-based budget, which meant that from the school, from the director's level and from the teacher level, the budget requests come in as one big package. They are submitted to either the department director or to the principal directly. The principals go through their budgets. They make any adjustments that they want to make to the budget, and then it comes to my desk. And I will tell you that I go through the budget line by line, just like the Board of Ed. We made, Bill Steglitz and I, significant reductions from the building request. primarily because we understand the financial situation that the town faces right now. And so we went deep into our cuts before we presented the budget to the members of the Board of Education. Our budget is an increase of $956,767, and that represents a 4.5% increase over the FY 25 budget. Talking to regional superintendents today, we are coming in at one of the lowest requests increases. Many of my counterparts are in at the 6% or higher. So we took our challenge seriously. If you could present that first slide, Danielle. One of the things we took really seriously was looking at enrollment numbers, as you know, because you get my enrollment report every month, that we have been seeing a decline in enrollment in the school district. And so, yep. This budget represents a reduction of 5 teaching positions. 3 at the elementary school and 2 at the high school. And they're all enrollment dependent. Will it increase class sizes in our elementary school? Yes, it will, but we don't believe to a significant number. So we are reducing a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 4 teacher. And then also we are combining a transition program that we have and a life skills special education program at the high school. We're collapsing it and combining it together. So we'll only need 1 teacher for that class. And then we have a social studies teacher retiring this year. We currently have 4 social studies teachers. The other content areas only have 3 teachers. We feel we can work the schedule with 3 teachers in social studies at the high school. So at this point, I'm going to turn the budget overview to Bill Steglitz. With this in mind, we want you to know that we took it very seriously when we put this budget together this year. And Bill is going to share with you what the budget highlights are. There is a sheet that you're going to want to look at, which is the top that says Thompson Public School budget drivers. Mr. Steglitz.
Thank you. Danielle, I don't know if it's possible to put this up on the screen for the viewers at home. As Melinda mentioned, the increase in the budget this year is $957,000 over FY 25. The budget drivers slide was pulled together to really kind of capture the highlights to take us from the 25 budget to the 26 budget. Starting in the first 4 or 5 sections at the top, we'll talk a lot about sort of employment and payroll related items, and then we'll take a walk through each of the departments and the more significant increases in those. So typically, one of the biggest drivers year to year is the contractual salary increases. The budget driver slide breaks that down by teachers, administrators, custodial, maintenance, and paraprofessionals. Just to bring attention to the larger teacher number there, obviously it's the largest population of employees in the district. However, that also includes raises, and then there were several positions during the year where there was turnover in the position. And the teacher had been replaced with a higher step teacher. So that is also a contractual salary increase, and that's built into that number. So $459,000 of the increase is in that category. The fiscal 26 budget includes added positions primarily in paraprofessional ranks. This is, and Dr. Jones will touch on this, I'm sure, in his comments. However, this is largely driven by IEPs throughout the district, individual education programs or plans, sorry, which if they require a one-on-one paraprofessional, the district is bound to go ahead and provide one for the student. In the past, there have been attempts to cut those positions. However, unfortunately, IEP needs require them to be reinstated and in some instances added. The next one, in full disclosure, was a finance department screw up last year. We actually had a high school English teacher who had left the district right when we were pulling the budget together. That position was taken off the payroll sheet when we were pulling together the FY25 budget. Obviously, that position was filled subsequently. So this is the effect of adding that back in. So it was, as it says in the note there, was unbudgeted in 25 and reinstated in the 26 budget. Other salary increases tries to catch that category, tries to catch the salary increases that aren't in the contractual bucket. Saw a lot of growth this year in substitute teachers and substitute custodians. And the other section there, non-contractual salary increases of 11 employees is other, I guess we would call them non-certified staff. There's 11 employees in that $23,950 bucket. The next section on the slide walks through the eliminated positions that Melinda just mentioned. There's also a benefit effect of that, which we'll talk about in a second. But those 5 positions being eliminated resulted in the savings of $357,000 in salary. Benefits gets a little bit tricky because we have a few things going in a couple different directions. At the moment, for conversations with our insurance brokers, we're expecting a 10% increase in benefits. You'll see that same 10% used at the school and at the town because it's the same contract. The next line there, the 2025 budget impact. This was a little bit interesting because at the conclusion of last year's budget process, we were expecting a 5% increase on health insurance. You may recall, we had started the budget at an expected 10%. The brokers had been revising that estimate down throughout the budget process, and we had been putting those revised estimates in the budget. After the budget was passed, and this holds true for both the school and the town, the actual increase ended up being less than 1%. So when we had finalized the budget, we had come in at 5%. But the actuals were actually 1%. When I was budgeting benefits for this year, I didn't want to grow what was a 4% too high health insurance budget last year. So I went off of our expected spend to budget for 2026. So that change is the $129,000 there. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that's a little convoluted, but I really just used our expected base versus what we had budgeted last year. Coverage changes is puts and takes, people changing coverage. That really kind of changes with the wind, to be honest with you. And then the next line there, eliminated position benefits are the benefits that the positions up above that have been eliminated had actually taken. So another $72,000 in savings from a benefit perspective related to those positions. Now I'm going to shift to the departments and talk about really sort of the larger increases that we saw from department to department. Obviously, there are offsetting decreases from line to line. Those activities are caught in the bottom line of this analysis, but I thought it was more meaningful really to discuss what were the big increases from year to year.
Pardon me, Bill.
Sure.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. If we have any questions, would you like them along the way, or do you want to wait till you're completed?
I'd rather get through it if I could.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Terrific, thanks. So at the high school, the 2 larger increases were money set aside for the upcoming NEASC visit, which is related to accreditation. And then the shifting of really industrial or shop related supplies that relating to the welding program, as well as electrical and plumbing instruction. In the past, the last 2 years, Melinda, we have grant funded those supplies. It's all the things you might imagine. I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is the gases that they use to run the welding torches. So that's flowing into back to the BOE budget this year, whereas it's been grant funded in the past. At the elementary school, one of the significant increases was expansion or re-upping of math lab. So a $20,000 increase. You can think of that as really focused math related tutoring by our own instructors.
After school for elementary students. Well, 3 through 5 right now.
In the pupil services realm, the large drivers of the increases there are RBTs or contracted services, I guess you could think of it, of 190,000, increased expected outplacements of 130, increases in evaluations and risk assessments, which I know Chris will touch on a little later, and legal related costs to bring that increase, the total of the larger increases in that line to 350,000. District-wide, we have set aside some money in the 2026 budget for cafeteria management. As you may have heard, we're having a heck of a time replacing Lisa Durand, our cafeteria director. And we have actually contracted with a company right now to take care of those duties while we continue the search. That $40,000 is there for the possibility of us either ultimately going with an outsourced provider or having to pay a higher salary in order to replace Lisa. Property and casualty insurance increases. The copier lease, this is really more of a shift from one line to the other. This number falls under district-wide now, but also includes a lot of the actual copy imprints this year in the contract where it didn't in the past. Legal, once again, this is trending up kind of across the board, really. Workers' compensation insurance, and then we have some software spending within the district-wide budget related to the survey tool that you've probably all received some of the surveys that have gone out through this tool and the hiring platform. In the plant budget, there's an increased focus on repairs and maintenance. Obviously, we just have a general price increases as everyone is experiencing. It particularly seems to be impacting the plant budget. In the building R&M line, we have some painting work that is long overdue, some door replacements and some HVAC work. Both of those things that are outside of the scope of the respective projects that are in those areas. We also have added some additional funds for athletic facility and playground R&M. You may have heard a rumor that there's a new track up the hill, and there's a certain board in town that's absolutely adamant that that track be maintained. So those funds were added to the budget. On the technology front, we see some increased spending related to cybersecurity enhancements, IEP related software, same IEPs that we discussed earlier, and communication software, as well as an expansion of the VHS, which is the virtual high school program, and an AI teacher related platform. The next line, the other increases, decreases. What this line catches is all the increases that weren't large enough to be discussed in the sections up top, and I set that scope at $6,000. So if there were individual accounts that changed by $6,000 or less, all of those increases flowed into this line and netted against the decreases in the budget lines that I mentioned earlier. So that's a net decrease of $209,000. All of that activity boils down to a FY 2026 budget increase of the $957,000 or 4.5%. Questions?
I had a question on the benefits. Last year, we also pegged 10%. We adjusted it to 5,
Yes,
came in at 1. So we were on the right side of wrong, right?
exactly.
We were on the right side of wrong. This year, you're saying 10. When will we know what it
Well,
actually is versus
they
our
actually-
season of budgeting?
There was a follow-up call today, and it looks like the range, and I haven't had a chance to work this into the budget, but the revised range that they discussed today on the call was 7 to 9%.
Oh, it's better.
Patrick was actually on the call and came over and let me know. So,
And at what
so
point will they know that it's only,
April.
unfortunately, we were calling them almost daily last year, and we still ended up with a 4% miss, if you will.
But it usually stabilizes around April.
Yeah,
and then
Oh, sorry.
I had 2 others, Steve.
Oh, no,
but
please.
Go ahead.
I didn't see.
Okay, and as far as coverage changes, I understand that would continue if somebody left or someone new's hired. I mean, I understand the mechanics of how that works. But is there a point in the year where you know, based on the population of employees on this day, what their selection is?
Well, you really,
That is
at any
crazy.
moment, you can take a snapshot and know, a matter of fact, what's built into this budget is the folks' current election as of when we did right now. So we go employee by employee, families, single plus dependents, or single or no coverage.
Right.
And that's really what drives the underlying numbers here.
So is there an open enrollment period within the budget, or is it frozen before the budget, I guess?
I think people can change at any
They can.
time. They can change at any time during the year, and what also drives it is retirements will drive it down. Occasionally we'll have employees who have, I guess you can't call them younger children, but children in their twenties who hit was it 25 or 26, and then they'll come off. So you'll see some movement from family to maybe single plus. But then on the other hand, we have many young teachers who may be starting a family, so that might push it the other way. So it kind of sloshes around all year long.
So you don't need to have a life event or a changing event.
No.
Employees can change at any time that they want. That's interesting.
No, I was gonna ask that same question.
Okay. And then my third question, I don't see it here, maybe because it didn't hit your $6,000 threshold, which might be incredible. But where would the buses land, the bus contract?
So interestingly enough, the buses, believe it or not, are in the decrease line. And this is why, similar to benefits, the way we budgeted benefits. For many years, we had taken what we had budgeted for transportation and gone and applied the expected increase, typically based on what's in the contract. This year, that's 5%. However, I, as you guys know, when I go ahead and pull these budgets together, I like to take a look at the history of actual spending. And I was able to see that, I don't know if we just have a little less bus usage than historically. Basically, I applied the 5% to our expected 2025 spend, not our 2025 budget. And that combined with what else rolls into transportation is fuel. And I think I've mentioned to you guys already, we actually were able to lock in a lower per gallon cost for diesel and all diesel, gas, and heating oil. This line is probably most impacted by the diesel line, the diesel fuel. So those
It's
two
lower.
things.
It's lower, but it's lower relative to this year's budget, not relative to
The
the real
actual,
world. The actual is going
Right.
up, but it's just compared to the.
Right.
Thank you. Steve, over to you.
Well, I think you kind of touched on the question. My question was, for example, on the paraprofessionals adding 8 positions, is that 8 versus the budget, or is it 8 versus what we have today?
that's 8 versus last year's budget.
And how does that compare to what we're doing today? What is it?
So we're at
We already have those on
33 right now, and there's actually, in your packet, there's a paraprofessional analysis. Just keep in mind that 33 number includes 1 grant funded para. 4 gen ed, 4 gen ed paras, 4, and the remainder are all special ed.
1 preschool, 3 kindergarten.
What did the budget start out? You mentioned that you reviewed it. And all was built up from the departments to the directors to you. What were the changes? What were the magnitude of the changes that you saw
Well over 2 million.
of cuts?
Well over 2 million of original ask.
Of original ask.
Right.
Down to a billion.
So that was cut by roughly $1 million.
That got cut before the board ever saw it.
One last question. Seeing teachers cut, and I know enrollment's down to some degree, and it's great that you can do that. I want to make sure kids are getting a good education. Are we putting that in jeopardy?
I don't believe so. I think the class sizes are within good range. To have a significant impact on class sizes need to be 15 or less. To have a significant impact. We're within the NAEYC guidelines for early childhood. I believe that our students are going to get a good education, providing we don't cut any deeper than the 5 that we currently have recommended.
Thank you.
So Bill, am I looking at this the right way? You're asking for 956 and contractually we're obligated to 945?
Contract, 459. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you're asking 956.
Yep,
All right. And you add up the contractuals, 845, basically.
yep, and I don't know if you also considered the savings on the eliminated positions there.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I mean, the bottom line is 845, but actually you're at
Right.
845.
Yep.
So it's, 110,000.
It's, yeah. That was a pretty. We went at it with a pretty fine pen.
Okay.
But to clarify, Bill, the 845 is contractual, and then that doesn't include the -208.
Right.
It's really a total of a 645 contractual, and about 300,000.
Yeah.
Just on top of it. Not to split hairs, but
Sure.
And to be fair to everyone sitting here, that pupil services line is our best. That's what we know today. Right, and I think we've had these discussions in the past. Individuals could move into town between now and next budget season, and that number could change, or move in or out of town, and that number could change substantially.
Well, we're experiencing that this year.
Right.
And the board of finance is well aware that we're up and running deficit in special ed, which is probably a nice segue into the next section.
Oh, look, that's next.
We thought we would put the more complex budget first.
Complex, I like that word.
Yeah. well played.
So, and everybody has the sheet with the little chart on it. That's what Dr. Jones is going to be referring to.
So there is a trend line underneath that. I don't know if we can get that up as well.
I'm gonna have to split it this way.
Everybody has the sheet, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, everyone does have it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my goal here with the first slide is to try to paint an overview of the number of staff that we utilize to run the department based on the needs of the students, okay? So looking at the first section there, so we have Marriott Fisher. Again, this is a snapshot. I'll go into greater detail on the following slide, or the following document rather. So Marriott Fisher, we have 10 teachers, and when I say 10 teachers, special education. A kindergarten special education teacher, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, 2 life skills teachers, and 2 teachers, 2 teachers in preschool. 1 full-time social worker, a full-time speech and language pathologist, a contracted speech and language pathology assistant, and 17 paraprofessionals in that building. 1 RN, and that's for 73 students under special education. Side note, the 3 buildings utilize 1 bus for special education transportation needs. That's bus 120. Thompson Middle School, again, this is a fluid document. Point being, I have 3 teachers, 3 for the inclusion resource model. We just hired another teacher, so now we have 3 resource teachers, but we still have 1 life skills teacher. We also have a half-time speech and language pathologist, a half-time school psychologist, an occupational therapist, a certified occupational therapy assistant, 7 paraprofessionals, 1 CNA. At the high school, 3 special education teachers, and that includes the reduction, as Mrs. Smith talked about,
with life skills and transition, half-time speech and language pathologist, half-time school psych. She's really district-wide, 1 BCBA, 1 social worker, 1 student support coordinator, 5 paraprofessionals, 1 CNA. And again, as you can see to the right of the schools, middle school has 54 students under special education, and the high school has 35. Bradley School, Wyndham County, there's no one in the elementary program at this point in time because the program is short a special education teacher. We're currently partnering with Stafford, Killingly, Plainfield, Woodstock. No transportation needed for our students to attend. There's 17 total students in the program, of which 6 are Thompson Public School students.
Dr. Jones, could you just in a nutshell explain what the Bradley Wyndham County School Partnership is, what that model is?
Sure. So in our public school, we're fortunate enough to have an out-of-district placement. So rather than we have a student that needs more supports and services and have to send them to another placement, a van would be needed to send the student out. We have a program on site that offers clinical staff and offers treatment for mental health, social, emotional, and behavioral learning. So we're very fortunate to have that. And again, there's no transportation needed for that. And I'll get into that in a moment when we talk about the 2 pie charts.
And just to interject, the Bradley program is an independent program that comes into the school, utilizes our space. And as a result, Dr. Jones will talk later about the savings that we see because of that.
Some of the schools that we currently partner with that are not able to attend the Bradley program, we're still partnering with EastCon, the Bradley School in New London, or Bradley School in New London located in Montville, the Groves School, Crossroads, TLC, the Learning Clinic, or Rolling Ridge, and Eagle Hill. Okay, and again, total number for out of district is at 25. 504s across the district, Marriott Fisher, we have 24. The middle school, we have 20. And at the high school, we have 21 for a total of 65. So now, the following 2 charts, what I try to demonstrate here, and this kind of ties into the trend line at the bottom. So the Bradley School program has been here for 6 years. So if you look at the chart to the left, pretending there is no Bradley School Wyndham County program. Okay, just based on numbers. So we would have had 28 vehicles over the 6 years on the road that we've been able to remove. But let's say we were not able to remove them. The 28 vehicles times roughly $70,000 per vehicle gives us the total number of $1,960,000 just in transportation. The tuition, again, with no Bradley School program here on site, with an average tuition over the years based on a mean of $75,000, and I have placements that are much more than that, $75,000, and that's with 62 students, and that's simply just looking at the smaller chart across the bottom trend line, 8, 12, 14, 14, 8, and 6. There's your 62 students. When you put that together, that gives you another $4,650,000 without the Bradley program. With the Bradley program here, again, there's no transportation needed. So there's a luxury to that part of it. And then with the reduced tuition, that gives you a rate. And again, that's over 6 years, looking at where students fall based on intensive rate, partnership rate. There's different factors that play a part to that. That comes out to, and again, same number of students, $2,170,000. When you put it all together, okay, what I simply did was I took the $4,650,000, subtracted the $2,170,000. That gave us a net difference, $2,480,000. I added in the additional transportation for a total net deficit positive outcome of $4,440,000 by having the Bradley program here for the past 6 years. And not to mention, of course, Thompson Public Schools has always operated under the auspice of least restrictive environment. We try to keep all our kids here to the best of our ability. Okay, if they need more support, so be it, but they're here, I can see it, and then we slowly tried to fade that out, and we tried to get them back with their typical peers, rather than me sending them out across the state, sometimes over an hour, which is very unfortunate, especially sending elementary children that far away. And oftentimes that has had to happen. So, and just another point, that does not factor in, just to be honest here, fuel, ESY, or any additional one-on-one staffing that I was not able to calculate in. So with that first page, does anyone have any questions about that?
We got a couple.
Sure.
I know we recently talked about this, I think at our last meeting. There, you said there's gaps statewide. I think you said there's 165 positions open statewide for special
Yeah,
education.
so right, so as of today, it was 171.
Okay. And then, can you just give us a quick highlight of these teachers that are here? I assume they're all master degreed, or they're not just fresh out of school, right? They've got additional schooling to be able to do some of this work in the special education world. These aren't just fresh out of school teachers that
No.
don't have additional certifications, right?
I feel like a vast majority, if not 95% of them, are all experienced teachers, number one, with superintendent's vision. We've also, as you already know, offered the Orton Gillingham training, so they're that much more trained, and they have another tool in their tool belt, if you will. So I feel like the staff that we have here, to be as honest as I can, are highly qualified to work with the students that are here. However, with that being said, if I could just be as honest as I can, you know, sometimes students come and register here, and to be honest with you, they come with a lot of trauma, broken families. And before you're gonna even attempt to educate a student that comes in like that, there's so much more work that has to be done by the staff. Like, we're trying to keep a child safe, comfortable. They feel loved. They feel as though they matter. We haven't even touched the education part of it, but that's a lot of students that come here. And that's the facts, and that requires a lot of service and support. Okay, so I want to make sure we understand that this is not just a student that comes in. I'm not making light to it, but a student that comes in with a learning disability. That's a different profile, very, very different profile. So, and then with the reduction, with the shortage of teachers in the Bradley program, that itself poses a number of issues. Because now I can't go that route. I have to look at other programs. They have a wait list. So now I have a problem. Well, I got to get this student in somewhere. Now, maybe I need to tutor for a period of time until I can provide support, but that student needs to be seen. That student needs treatment. And then you're looking, and as you're looking, different rates of tuition, maybe an additional vehicle. There's a lot that plays into it.
My final one is, that 65 504s, that's out of a
Yes.
total population of 795.
797 is the last.
797.
Okay.
So if you think about it, with IEPs and with 504s, a good quarter of our students need accommodations to learn.
And just clarifying, the 504 is not special education. That is a gen ed law, a discriminatory law. You know, if a student has a medical diagnosis, it's being affected, whatever the medical diagnosis is, it's affecting them. You may qualify for a 504. I use the example, I have a broken hand. I go into Mr. Young's class, he has a hand crank pencil sharpener. I need an electric pencil sharpener so I can access the pencil sharpener. He says, no, he's discriminating against me. I need an electric pencil sharpener so I can access that pencil sharpener. 504, I need that accommodation to use the pencil sharpener. Could be as simple as that. Okay. Anyone else, any questions on the first page? All right, so second page, again, a little bit more in depth, just based on school. So to the left-hand side, Marriott Fisher, 74 students that qualify for special education services, 24 students that qualify for 504s, and then I listed the staff really through pupil services that play an impact to work with these students. We have 5 inclusion teachers, inclusion/resource teachers, so they primarily work in the gen ed class with the gen ed teacher, but they have the ability to pull out small group or one-on-one to their resource room to remediate instruction. We have 2 life skills special education teachers, pre-K to grade 4. We have a social worker, a guidance counselor, speech and language pathologist, speech and language pathology assistant that's contracted through an agency, 4 program paraprofessionals, and again, 3 are for kindergarten and 1 is for preschool. That is gen ed, does not come out of pupil services. Just to piggyback, Mr. Steglitz, 3 program paras for the kindergarten classrooms, 1 RN as a 1-to-1, 10 one-on-one paraprofessionals, and 4 registered behavior technicians, and again, those are contracted services. The middle school, 54 students currently qualify for special education service, 20 qualify for 504 plans. And again, here's that staffing and what that looks like. 3 inclusion resource teachers, grades 5 through 8, 1 life skills special education teacher, 1 speech and language pathologist, half-time in the middle school, the other half is in the high school. 1 building paraprofessional, 1 life skills program paraprofessional, 1 CNA as a one-on-one, 5 one-on-one paraprofessionals, and 5 registered behavior technicians. Again, that's a contracted service that comes out of pupil services line. Lastly, Turtle Rock Memorial High School, 35 students that qualify for special education, 21 that qualify for section 504. Here's what that breakdown looks like. 2 inclusion/resource teachers, grades 9 through 12, 1 life skills/work exploration special education teacher. That's that program that Superintendent Smith was talking about, marrying those 2 programs together. 1 social worker, again, the speech and language pathologist, that's half-time, the other half is middle school. 1 guidance counselor, 1 student support coordinator, 1 board certified behavior analyst, building paraprofessional, 1 life skills program paraprofessional, 1 CNA as a 1-to-1, 3 one-on-ones, 1 behavior technician, again, contracted. And then some of our district-wide staff, our school psychologist is district-wide, being one of her, a 1 board certified behavior analyst, a contracted service that oversees all of the RBTs that we contract with. 1 physical therapist, that position is part-time due to the small caseload. An occupational therapist district-wide, as well as the certified occupational therapy assistant. Again, that's a contracted service. Any questions on? Yes.
I understand the one-on-one. Does that mean, for example, the RN one-on-one means that person, that RN is dedicated to 1 student?
Correct. We had a student move in, significantly medically compromised, needed a RN. Yes.
And ditto for the other. Is there a difference between contracted, from the student's viewpoint? Is there any difference between a contracted professional or not?
From the student's viewpoint,
Yeah.
no. So, but an RBT, a registered behavior technician versus a paraprofessional, they are very different. And the function of what they're able to do, data collection, so on and so forth.
Dr. Jones, just to be clear, these positions that are filled by a mandate that we have as a district against a certain student that may have a need.
Like 100%,
So this isn't,
100%.
just to be clear, sorry, Justin, one second. Just to be clear, this isn't we're not embellishing or indulging or adding services or staff person or contracted just because the law mandates that we do this, and this takes precedent over anything else in this other budget.
Correct. Students who register here have X needs. I review the file. They come from another district. I look at the programming that they come from. Do we have programming that mirrors that programming? What are the services and supports that they need? Geez, we don't have that service and support. Documented medical, everything is there. We need to provide that, again, under FAPE. Free and optimal word, appropriate public education. The optimal word of appropriate. So whatever the student needs, we are obligated to provide it. The next section was a question that came from a prior meeting. So there are 13 qualifying categories of special education. In the state of Connecticut, there's 2 subcategories, so I don't want there to be any confusion. So I did provide, I'm not going to read them through. I just wanted to provide you with the definition of each category. So for an example, I'll just do one briefly. Okay. OHI. Okay, OHI standalone is more about a medical diagnosis. Child has leukemia. Okay, that is OHI. OHI ADD, ADHD is a subcomponent of OHI. The state has designed that because they want to be able to keep track of that category, that specific subcategory from the rest of OHI. And it's very similar to specific learning disability and specific learning disability dyslexia. Okay, so to the right of each exceptionality, you see the number of students that fit into that exceptionality. If you tally this up, you have my word. If you tally it up, it's going to bring you to a number that'll be 25 less than what the total number is, but that's minus the out of district number of 25. So if you add in the out of district number of 25, that's going to bring you home to the whole number here in the district. Okay. All right. And then that brings me to, and then I did cite the information, just if you wanted to go back and look where this information came from in terms of definitions, right from the State Department of Education website. Last slide. So I want to be a little bit more clear, and I apologize if I was not the last time. So just in terms of the Bradley School Windham County program. So there was some discussion that went around with that. So when we first embarked on having that program come in, I was part of the proposal of the program. Because Thompson is the host district, we only felt as though it would be right that Thompson would receive some sort of benefit other than having the program here. We're also inviting other neighboring districts having their students here. Okay, so as a result, the first 6 students in the program, all different students from neighboring districts. Now you get to the 7th student, doesn't matter. Whoever, Thompson receives a reduced rate on 1 student tuition as a result on the 7th student of approximately $6,500. But $6,480. So let's just call it $6,500. Okay, so $6,500 minus just the average. Okay. Then let's say you get to the 14th student, same rules apply. Okay, you could have 2 Thompson students in there and you're at 14 and the rest are neighboring districts. Only Thompson receives a discount, a reduced rate on that 7th number, 7, 14, 21. So we have 17 students currently in there. We get 2 students at a reduced rate. There's no check coming in for the amount of $6,400 times two, it's just a reduction at the end of the year as these invoices are coming in, reducing that number. So I just wanted, just to clear that up, I hope I didn't lead anyone to something other than just that. Okay. And then lastly, this came up and I asked Superintendent Smith for some help. My administrative assistant, Mrs. LeVake, and I know she's on as well. Just because, you know, the office is extremely busy, there's a lot going on, but one of the pieces that, and we'll call it uncontrollable variables of high volatility in pupil services. And I try to be on top of as much as I possibly can, but there are some things that happen that I feel like I can't help. So I want to bring it forward. Now, if someone has an idea, tell me. I am more than happy to try anything you would like me to try, but I just want you to understand some of those obstacles. All right, so the first one, there have been many students, currently 5, that were living here in Thompson, removed through DCF and placed in neighboring towns such as Hamden, New London, Putnam. As a result, I don't know any information as to why a student is removed. Okay, student is removed. As a result, we have to then absorb the special education service costs as well as transportation for those students in the district in which they have been placed. Currently, right now, those 5 students, that brings us in the neighborhood of $120,000. So student lands in Hamden, they have special education services, and they need transportation from the foster family to the school. We have to pay the transportation. They need speech, OT, PT, counseling. We pay for those services. I'm not at the table when those decisions are made. It is a little bit different than Rhode Island. We had something called ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, where I would be on a phone call with the neighboring special ed director. We would be able to talk about it with DCF worker, and then a decision would be made and a memo would go out telling you what was happening with the student. Now you just receive a 603, off the student goes, and you receive an invoice. So I don't have much ability to work with that. Just want that to be out there. Number 2, as a result of several risk assessments, the recommendations have caused the district to hire additional RBTs. RBTs are a last stop gap before we try to send us, before we may have to send a student out to a more restrictive setting. The RBT has the ability to track data, report that to a board certified behavior analyst, who may then in turn want to write an FBA, functional behavioral assessment. In order to do that, you have to identify the function of a behavior, write the plan to then extinguish those behaviors. And with that comes a positive behavior intervention plan. I'm just kind of throwing some letters out there that may not mean much, but that's how that function works. So some of these risk assessments that have come back have caused us through the recommendation, and I don't disagree with any of them based on what we know from our threat assessment meetings, we've had to increase that number. And to look at outplacements due to emotional dysregulation and the need of a therapeutic treatment program. To date, we have sent out 6 students for risk assessments, roughly $3,500 per risk assessment. $21,000, in which 3 students resulted in outplacements. And again, to be fair, the Bradley program here on site is not fully functional and up and running due to a staff shortage, because had that have not been the case, we probably would have been able to tap into that program, to be as honest as I can about that. Number 3, several students in need of services and supports because of medical complications. Again, these students have enrolled here. 1 student requiring a one-on-one paraprofessional, and that was iffy. It was very close to a CNA. 1 student requiring an RN and another requiring a CNA. Wait list in different out-of-district programs, limiting those placements in which I can write referrals based on appropriate programs that meet the needs of the students. For example, EastCon, we had students at one program, that program closes down. Now they're shifting the students to another one. So Danielson no more, and now we're gonna go to Columbia. And now we have to transport from Danielson to Columbia. Again, outside of my control, but that's the facts, important that you hear that. Students moving into district that already are outplaced. One student moved into district while already being outplaced, and the district agreed to the current placement based on the treatment plan. Student came in with the outplacement program in place, doing very, very well. Played everything through. The goal would be that student would come back to our Bradley program, to the high school where that program is up and running, but again, we include that out-of-district placement, that cost. School choice, Killingly VOAG, 2 students currently attending with special education services. Pupil services must pay for the services and supports of those 2 students. That's in the neighborhood of $20,000. Students that have been hospitalized due to trauma, mental health, etc. We've seen a number this year. The district accrues the educational costs while the student is inpatient. Due to increased needs, the district hired 8 paraprofessionals this year.
Unbudgeted.
Unbudgeted. This I keep on the monthly slide, just so you can see the referrals of special education over the last 3 years. And again, right now, we're on pace for the highest number that we've had over the last 3 years. Mr. Prentice is doing a great job with the RTI process. Sent me up a packet today. I can see all the interventions that have been tried and true with Fidelity. It gets to the point after tier 3, it's going to a special education referral, and we'll move to our own testing. Shortage of special education teachers across the state, which is impacting the Bradley Windham County program, and our current inability to refer to middle and elementary. And then lastly, due to medical complications, the need for tutoring. And typically I utilize a program called Project Genesis. A one-on-one mentoring program where they go, they pick up a student, they work one-to-one, go to the public library, work on our curriculum. That's for 20 hours a week. It's a 30-hour-a-week program. And then they also take the students out into the community for work exploration to try different job sites.
And Dr. Jones, I want to add number 12. And number 12 is EastCon, where we only have 2 students placed. Just this month, because of their own financial instability, has raised our out-of-district rate at 15% per student.
Yep.
And I know we utilized one transportation vehicle through EastCon, and that went up 5%. So for us, that's $31,000 just this month that they changed the rates. And we have no control over that. So that's number 12.
Thank you for that.
Just one more quick one.
Sure.
We've talked in the past about what falls under the pupil services budget, and I feel that sometimes it becomes a catch-all. It becomes a catch-all for homeless students, for a student that we may have expelled, a student, any students that fall into those types of categories end up under pupil services. You didn't mention any of those, but I think we have some homeless right now.
English language learners.
Yeah,
English
he-
language.
Yeah, English language, right? That all falls into this. Somebody moves in from Portugal, doesn't speak English. We have to provide somebody that can teach them in their native language, right? So that falls under pupil services. So we can't say don't come to town because of it, right? So I think it's important to understand the specific volatilities. I know, there's a stigmatism behind special ed, and when you think special ed or pupil services, now that I know the term that we use, the pupil services, okay, it's not just someone who has a reading disability or has a learning disability or is blind or something like that. This job has everything in it. So I think it's important that we understand that as well.
But basically anything outside general ed instruction.
Just, my department should be special ed.
Correct.
Solves my problem. That's it.
Yeah, I know from just having discussions in town,
Nope.
that the you know, people think that a special ed individual is someone with ADHD, someone with, you know, that's in a wheelchair. It's not just that.
No.
So,
Correct. Jason.
thanks. Any other questions?
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Jones?
And we're sorry that the presentation for special ed was lengthy, but we thought it was important that everyone understood since it's a big chunk of our budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a good portion of our students. also.
Correct. Yeah, right.
Okay, we will move along, to the high school.
Yep.
Mr. Mellon, you want to give us an overview of what's happening at Turtle Rock?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, meeting many for the first time, so. Howdy, so we touched upon a couple of these things that, when Superintendent Smith gave a report. We are reducing 2 positions, a social studies, teacher, again, that person's retiring. And a life skills teacher, we're combining the programs. You know, one of the biggest thing is I'm an advocate for students and their needs, and I'll fight, you know, as I need to get them any services they need. With the reduction of these 2 positions, I feel we can still adequately, support, our students and give them the education that they deserve. So I'm not worried about that at all. If I was, I would definitely be in Superintendent Smith's office, arguing the point, but I don't think there's a need to, from what I've seen. In my short time here, we can definitely streamline, those courses and still provide adequate amounts of education to the students. We wanted to increase our consumable supplies for plumbing and electrical. We're seeing a higher demand for those types of courses. When we polled the middle school students, the 8th graders that are coming up, more than half, you know, by a show of hands, stated that they wanted to go into a career pathway as opposed to college after school. And as everyone knows, we are in desperate need of plumbers, welders, electricians, mechanics, and things of that nature. So again, trying to meet the needs of our population, I think it's important to provide some more money in those areas. I think our current budget provides teachers all the necessary tools and supplies to prepare our students for college and for net readiness. Also allows our pathways programs to meet the increasing demand for these types of courses. Again, Superintendent Smith over the years has added multiple pathways that are extremely beneficial to providing our students with real world experience. And hopefully when they graduate toward a lot, they'll be on their way. They're already going to be on their way to a career, whether that's in welding, nursing, hopefully teaching someday. We're trying to put a teaching pathway in, but things of that nature that where they can accomplish that within the high school setting. And that's a big push nationwide for that. I think we're doing an excellent job. And then the other part of this budget, we do have NEAS coming. With that coming pretty high expenses, but again, it's something we have to absorb, something we have to do for accreditation. So that's pretty much a brief overview of everything. If anyone has any questions.
I'd like to make a comment here. If you look at his detailed budget, it's only an increase of 2.4% over last year's budget. And over his projected spending, it's just a little bit like $60,000 over the projected spending. So he's keeping a tight line for next year. Thank you.
Welcome.
We are good.
Oh, you have a question?
Just a comment, along with the NEASC accreditation that's coming up next year, we do have the capital request that's sitting with you guys for the 25,000 for the lockers.
Yes.
It's actually more than that, and Bill will touch upon that when he gets to his budget.
No, but I think their
Oh, yeah.
their contribution, right, the
Correct.
contribution that the Board of Finance has promised
Right.
to us to complete that capital project is the 25,000, correct?
From last year's, from FY 25, but Bill has an updated estimate on the lockers.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. We're still, everybody still agrees,
Still counting on that.
that one's still there.
That has to get done.
But half been away.
Right, that's the NEASC accreditation that's coming up next year, so that's something we're gonna have to get done this summer. Because
Yes.
that is part of the accreditation.
Yeah, I didn't forget if that's the
Are you
question.
sure we're gonna go back on a word? Is that
No,
what you
no,
said? No, is that what you said? No, I wanna hear it. Did you paint those lockers yet?
No, sir.
Well, you have in the transfer account 25,000 put away, and now you need to add some more so we can get it done this summer.
I want a date that you're gonna paint them, then I'll give you the money.
Oh,
And
we'll give
Bill-
you a date.
I hear about these lockers one more time.
Yeah, we'll find it.
How many times gonna talk about the lockers?
Years. We did the tour for the middle school parents. Again, we're trying to retain students, one of the big complaints of the.
Ms. Granado, would you give us an overview of the
Yeah.
middle school, please?
Good evening, nice to see everyone. So for us, due to the increased student need that we had back in 24-25, we had to implement a special education teacher, and we added back in the reading teachers. So as we stand right now, we went through our budget item by item, and right now we're just sustaining to keep it afloat and going. You know, the things that we have put in are just to meet our curriculum and just program of study. Things that we do for the students extracurricular, we try to seek out grants, like we had a $4,000
A $5,000 Scripps grant and some
Yeah.
Title IV money for after-school enrichment.
Right, so, it just hanging in there and just sustaining what we do have, and we're thankful for it.
And I think that was the message you gave to me when you did your budget, that we are not asking for anything else, but we are asking to maintain what we have.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are you guys, and this is a question that I was recently asked, are you seeing that the COVID learning bubble has kind of shifted through the elementary school and is now moving into the middle school? Is that why
Correct.
we're, okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
We're starting to see it in grade
Mm.
4 going into grade 5. That learning gap is getting wider, but think back of where those children were in COVID times. Their fundamental years were interrupted in KM1.
But to flip back a couple of people ago, right? Things that we're doing to correct that are the Orton Gillingham
Mm.
Correct?
students that we're bringing in and that math lab program that we
Yes.
put in the elementary school.
Yes, and the high dosage tutoring, which was grant funded, that ended last Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Prentice, would you present the elementary school for us?
Good evening, folks. Pleasure to be here. Nice to see you along the same lines as Principal Granado and Principal Mellon. We are not asking for much at the elementary, but I can assure you that our budget supports the vision of Thompson Public Schools. We will create high-performing students, there's no doubt about it, at the elementary school, and they will become knowledgeable and independent and community connected. So that is the vision that we have at the elementary, at the middle, and the high school. And when we put together our budget, we have that in mind. Of course, you have those 4 highlighted areas, the cornerstones really of a meaningful elementary experience, of course, literacy, math, and any school-wide programs. I did put ELL in there, and Mr. Young briefly spoke on that. Number 1, literacy instruction. For those of you that do not know, the state of Connecticut in 2021 passed the right to read legislation. Basically, the state of Connecticut will oversee all literacy practices in every single school. Attached to that means that they require certain curriculums, certain instruction, certain professional development, and certain things that should happen on a day-to-day basis in the elementary school. When we put together our budget, Certainly our reading team, our reading specialists meet with every single teacher in the elementary school to look over that content and the material that covers the latest research, the latest best practices in reading instruction. So that's what we're targeting when we order certain materials. We're looking at what can best target reading instruction. Of course, subscriptions for instructional supplies is in the budget. Again, that was a state approved curriculum. We had to buy a certain curriculum and with that came a certain price tag. So with respect to literacy instruction, we're maintaining what we have. We're not really asking for a lot, but we get a lot out of the folks that teach literacy at the elementary school. Number 2, math instruction. We're fortunate enough to have Patty Chenille, who's our curriculum specialist, have a good conversation with every elementary teacher to discuss with them what is the best curriculum to provide to the students at the elementary school. She has added in her elementary budget for all the students, which is interesting, a forefront, a benchmark software that can actually determine the RTI needs of every student at the elementary school. Dr. Jones briefly touched upon RTI. RTI is just an acronym that means response to intervention. So let's just say a student at the elementary school has an academic concern or a behavioral concern. The teacher reaches out to the administrator. We have meetings. What we're trying to achieve in those meetings is provide instruction to those students so that they do not have to move into the special ed process. So this math software will better help teachers identify students that have those RTI needs. So we're kind of working in concert with each other. Of course, we have a number of school-wide programs, and I put it under number 4. I put that because I think it's important. Certainly, I mentioned it in the beginning. It really is a cornerstone to a good elementary experience. We provide a ton of incentive programs for students: harvest lunches, hat days, Valentine bingos, cookies and cocoa with Santa, that really provide a well-rounded experience for every student at the elementary level. And that's what we strive to do. And then finally, ELL students, 4 or 5 years ago, this is a program that didn't really exist at the elementary level, really even district-wide. And I bring it up because the landscape of education can change dramatically over the course of 4 or 5 years. We know that in 2 or 3 years, the number of ELL students coming into the district has tripled. And with that comes a price tag. We've been fortunate enough to experience that diversity in this community. But we also have a legal and ethical obligation to educate those ELL students. I think we do a great job at the elementary level. Again, the landscape of education can change at the drop of a hat, but we're not asking for money. We're just maintaining the wonderful programs that we have at the elementary level.
Questions for Larry?
Sure.
I've heard a number of comments, not just from you, but from others, other presenters, talking about state requirements. I mean, I want to understand, are these requirements that you agree with, or are these things requiring us to do things that don't make sense? Help me understand that. That sounds like a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, well, I'll just connect. I certainly agree with the right to read. Every single student K through 3 should be able to read in several years. That's the whole premise behind the right to read legislation. Absolutely agree with that. We have a number of teachers at the elementary level, Dr. Jones alluded to it, that are becoming OG certified. It's an approach to teaching reading, to getting those kids to better able to understand content, speaking, language, reading, and we absolutely agree with it. the research supports the right to read legislation. So, which also supports the science of reading.
So it's anchored in legislation and law, whether it's federal or state. Right to read is one good example. We had 5 defined curricula that we could select from. State gave us some grant money for that. To buy those materials, but we were mandated to pick one of the 5. Luckily, we were already using one of the 5, so we only had to update the program, which saved us considerable amount of money. But then there's rules around that legislation, and practices that we have to put into play, which are labor intensive, and it does impact staffing. And so, that's and the same with ELL. That's federal mandate, that we have to service, English language learners. And Larry's right. 2 years ago, we might have had 3 ELL students in the district, and many of them were somewhat English speaking, depending on the level they came in at. We currently have 21. Last year in February, we picked up 7 students. They all came from Portugal, and most of them non-English speaking. Delightful, wonderful families and children, and an asset to our community. But that service needed to be there. And if everybody remembers back then, we had a half-time ELL teacher. We now have a full-time, and that full-time teacher's telling me this year, that's about the number of kids she can service district-wide. And if we get another influx of students like we did last February, she's not going to be able to meet all their needs. So that, like special ed, is a fluid number as well. And I think that's what Justin was trying to get at. That's a population of students that are tucked under Dr. Jones's budget.
Yeah, they go to Dr. Jones, so.
Yeah. Larry, thank you.
I guess my question though is, are we being required to do things that we don't think make sense? That maybe it's a waste of resources or money.
It all makes sense to us.
Okay.
Yes, we do believe it. And hence, the science of reading and why we're really shifting to the Orton-Gillingham model, not specifically just for that model, because embedded in that model is the science of reading, which is sound research that we all agree with.
Steve, I think there's pupil services mandates.
Sure.
That I think some of us question, but there's the gen ed mandates, the reading and writing and math that I think they've always, at least the way I see it, and I've got one child that's been through the elementary school here and another child that's just finishing the elementary school now. And the learning from when I was in elementary school to the learning now, there's so much more that they have to absorb in such a short period of time that it's almost like it's crammed in. And I think, and on top of that, there's the COVID, there's the other pressures that are going on that have just changed the educational landscape. I think the state could do better at funding some of this pupil services. Being completely honest, I think the state could do better. The state boasts a budget surplus every year, but we suffer as a town trying to make ends meet.
Man,
So the state needs to do better. They have to do better. They refuse to do their due diligence. But I think I understand what Mr. Herbert is asking. Or do we have unfunded mandates that we don't agree with, but that we just legally have to do? Is there federal and state nonsense that we're having to comply with that's costing the district significant amounts of money?
You know, off the top of my head, there are some things like, and we won't even get into what just happened with the expanded sick leave bank. But that's one fine example, and I haven't gone over that with the Board of Ed. But that's one fine example of state legislation that makes absolutely no sense. When it drills down to students, I think we can all agree the ideas and reasons or the rationale for the legislation is there. However, how can a small town like Thompson meet all of those mandates? And that's part of the issue. Even when it comes to course offerings at the high school, we have a small high school. We can't offer all of these new classes that they're asking us to teach. Because we just don't even have the student population. We'd have 2 kids in a class, right? And so it's some of that is you scratch your head about, but quite honestly, most of these things around reading and math have a good sound research behind them. It's just that how do we go about meeting those needs with a fixed budget and only limited resources. I'm going to tell you that I think we do a phenomenal job in special education and all the other areas, given the resources we have. We stretch every grant dollar that we can. And I feel good about what we're doing, but I do agree with you. There are some things that you just have to scratch your head about, and this upcoming expanded sick leave nonsense is something I totally disagree with and will have a negative impact on the district, but we'll get into that in my briefs on Friday.
All right.
Bill?
Subject near and dear to our hearts, Mr. Birch.
I'm glad it's near and dear to your heart.
Good evening. So this first slide just shows the total overall budget for plant and operations. It breaks it down into utilities, which Bill alluded to. We've done pretty good as far as purchasing oil and fuel and electricity. It goes down to fixed costs like the salaries, the contractual obligations that we have, and many others. I think the point here is that when we get to what's really discretionary in this budget, it's very low. There's $18,000, and the little sliver that says other, that's for dues and fees that goes to the state. We have to pay the state so we can have boilers. We have to pay the state so that we can have elevators, and their inspectors have to come. But I wanted to show it like this because you can see in that budget there are gaps. There are places where there's nothing there. The next slide, this is mostly for the Board of Ed members because this is a single line. It's building repair and maintenance. They ask to see it every year so that they can see the detail that's in this line. But for everybody, I just want to point out that if you look at that slide and you look at the previous slide where I say there's gaps. So on the second line, it says replace 4 VFDs. We've got the cost is $26,000, and that is in the upcoming budget. But that's due to a failure that took place that was an electrical surge that happened a month ago. By all rights, that should be repaired this year. That should be repaired now. But there's no money. We don't have the $26,000 to do it. Replace a condenser on RTU 5 for the high school media center. That came up in September. We should have done it this year. Should probably do it before spring, but again, there's no money. So these things have to be put into a following year budget. And then as they get into that following year budget, well, if something happens that year, well, then it's going to get put off again. If you go down, try to see which line it is. It says emergency power high school. It's a $12,000 number. It's 3 lines up from the bottom in the first column. And I can tell you right now that that's not a good number anymore because that number is a good 3 years old. Because we put it in the budget every year and then something happens. What are those somethings that happen? If you look in October,
we had an oil pump failure at the elementary school. Well, when the oil pump failed, this is the pump that takes the oil out of the ground, out of the tank, and sends it to the elementary school and also sends it to the roof for the early childhood center. That failed. But when that failed, it also caused 4 boilers to have oil pump failures on themselves. The oil pumps themselves are $7,000, and it was a 12-week wait. They're not here yet. In the meanwhile, I've had to buy 2 temporary oil pumps that don't really work well, and going through a list of repairs to try to keep these boilers running. I've already spent $15,000 trying to keep these boilers running, waiting until I get these oil pumps, which hopefully is coming very soon at this point. It was the second week of October that this happened. So in this budget, there's nothing for those things that we all know are going to happen every year. I mean, this is a facility that's pretty close to 400,000 square feet. It's aging. This particular part of the facility was built in 1960. So let's face it, things wear out. If you look at some of the other things in this line, you'll see that, you know, there are doors that we have listed to be replaced. And the question's going to be, you just got $500,000 to replace doors. Well, there was a list of doors that were identified, doors and hardware that needed to be replaced. We got estimates, came in at $500,000. Well, when we put it out to bid, we only got 1 bidder. And that came in and it couldn't do all the work. So these are the doors that needed to be replaced, the hardware that needed to be replaced, that didn't get covered. But it doesn't change the fact that they need to be replaced. You look at, you can look at any one of these things, you know, sprinkler testing, sprinkler repairs. We have no choice. We have to do that by law. Pest management, we have to do that by law. The fire extinguisher service, the Ansel systems, which is the hoods that are in the kitchens. Security equipment repairs. Everybody who comes into this facility, obviously like everybody else, even if you have a plumber, they're all charging more. And most of these vendors have to travel quite a distance. Most of these vendors are traveling an hour to get here, and we're paying for that. As far as painting the high school hallways, that's not the lockers. That's the hallways that the lockers live in. And this is another $29,000, but it's still one of those things that there are some that could argue that painting should be routine maintenance and it should be ongoing. And I could agree with that. But I think it would mean we had to hire a painter and put him on staff. Because you could just continuously paint in this facility and still not be caught up. We've got paint 6 classrooms in this budget. It's in this budget every single year.
Haven't done it in 2 or
We
3
didn't paint any last year. We didn't paint any the year before. The few years before that, we did pretty good. We got them done, but what happens is that, you know, you all said it earlier, you have to make tough decisions. And so when it comes down to making a tough decision, like, all right, are we gonna buy oil or are we gonna paint? The painting goes, but then that goes and goes and goes, and then 10 years down the road, now it's not $6,000 to put in an operating budget, it's $30,000 because NEASC is coming this year.
Bill, do you have a total price on the lockers? I know Bill Steglitz put it in the town, but what was that new price?
So they've moved to so the lockers is not in this budget anymore. And as a result, I've got numbers, I've got quotes on it. But I don't have them at the top of my head, but it's way more than $25,000.
88.
It's in the 80s.
Yeah.
To paint the lockers. So the way I had it quoted was as the base and the alternate. So the base is to paint the lockers, the 1986 lockers that are really beat up. And the alternate was to also paint the lockers that were put in 2007 in the end so that they'd all match. That are not nearly in as bad a shape. But it's in that number is in the eighties now. And the other thing that I want to point out when and we're talking about mandates from the state, you can see that we've got HVAC service for $15,000. So as a result of COVID, there's a couple of things that happened. The state all of a sudden realized that indoor air quality within school buildings throughout the state was pretty deplorable in many places. I have to say, I don't think it was deplorable here. We've worked pretty hard over the last 20 years that I've been here to make sure that it's not. And as a result of that, the state also came up with some funds, which we did pretty good. We got approved for a $13 million contract to put in new equipment and improve the quality of the air within the facility even more. But they also tied to that some caveats. And first one was beginning last year and every 5 years thereafter, you have to have an evaluation done by either an architect or an engineer or a certified HVAC contractor. Year one, we did pretty good because we had just done the HVAC evaluation, so I had it in my hand and I submitted that, and that was great. But this is year two, 3 more years from now, we're gonna have to do that again. And the recommendation from the state is that you hire a contractor to service all the HVAC equipment all the time, and then the report becomes part of that. Well, in the past, we've done our own work. Very few instances do we have to farm out HVAC work. We've been able to do it ourselves. Done pretty good. The equipment runs pretty well, I think. And the proof to that, to me, the proof to that was during the pandemic when we only closed for 28 days and everybody was here. And that has to do with air quality, in my opinion. I think was the difference between us and other folks. But moving forward, we're gonna have to have this service done. It's almost like we can't do it anymore.
Of that $285,000, some of that is every year line item stuff, and some of that is backlog maintenance. And if we had a discretionary funding for building maintenance for things that break, things are gonna break. As you said, everything is aging, something is gonna break every year that's not in our budget. If you were to have a Bill Birch discretionary fix-it fund, how much would you think that should be on an annual basis? Beyond the things that you budget for, what do you think the emergency fix-it fund should be? 100,000, 200,000?
I would say it would have to be at least 100,000. You remember, everybody in this room remembers the year before last when we had to replace 2 boilers, $88,000. All of a sudden, like, hey, guess what? So and I can tell you there's 2 more boilers that are going to be right behind them within the next few years. That unfortunately, just like the door project, you know, we got $13 million worth of HVAC equipment, but that's really about a third of what's really required to bring this building up to 100%. So yes, Matt,
So this
it
is
would have to be
all
at
cost
least
money.
$100,000.
Yeah, right, okay. And every year that we fall further behind, it's gonna cost more money to catch back up.
I would assume.
Right.
Well, I'm glad I cheered everybody up.
Just a note before going forward, can we put, if it's an annual versus if it's a capital improvement against this list? We just like, I don't know, star or whatever,
Star,
something,
yeah.
something to tell me if it's an annual versus if it's a, we're gonna do it this year.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
Thanks.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Bill.
Heather?
Good evening. Happy to say the IT budget for next year, there's no major upgrades. Hardware, network wise that need to be done next year. But the major drivers are just your systematic replacements of outdated devices. If you remember, during COVID, we got a large grant to get one-to-one devices, Chromebooks. So it's important that we cycle through and replace a certain percentage of those devices each year. So asking for student Chromebooks, teacher laptops, and the high school drafting lab. That lab, it's about 8 years old, but we've upgraded the memory, we've upgraded several of the components in those computers to get them running very well each year. But at this point, I would definitely recommend replacing those. And we're looking at possible grant funding. Fingers crossed that I'll be able to do that through a grant. Another driver is enhanced security measures. In this day and age, you know, antivirus and firewall are just not cutting it anymore. So I'm looking into a cybersecurity suite, which is provided by our current antivirus providers. So it'll work with what we already have. And we'll get regular protection updates and patches against cyber threats. And then I've also been asked, you know, by several members of the board, teachers, parents, just to get some sort of an improved communication platform. Just a central platform for everything, right? Because if those of you have, you know, kids in several different schools, you've got different apps you have to use. Teachers communicate in different ways, administrators do. So I'm looking into something that would house grades, attendance, messages with teachers, messages with administrators, as well as our district communications all in one place, which I think would be very beneficial. It also includes a translation feature, which is really important. So the parents would be able to set that program to whatever language they would need. Those are really relates of my budget this year. Are there any questions?
Just one, Heather.
Yep.
Do you know if our cybersecurity virus protection is US based or is that a foreign based?
I would have to double check on that. I feel like it's US based, but they probably subcontract some. Like say if something did happen and we needed them to mitigate and to get into our system and really dive down, I bet that is not US based, but I can look.
I know corporate America has shifted over to US based cyber threat and security because a lot of the foreign stuff gets hacked and then they find out all the neat little holes that are created by the cyber stuff and then comes our way, so.
Double check that.
Thank you.
Do you do any cybersecurity training?
We have not yet. I mean, other than the emails that the town and the school receive from me, such as, you know, just be on the lookout for phishing emails, you know, people never give out personal information. So I kind of do some baseline training right now. I'm hoping that I know that there are some free resources out there. So I just need to tap into those and get that set up.
But your department has been going through training.
Yes, we have as my department.
Yeah, I was referring more to training the rest of the.
But the rest of the staff, yeah,
Putnam, we have the thing called known before,
know before.
and we have to, anyone who has a Putnam email has to, mandatory, has to take it, has to pass it.
Okay.
I think it's 4 or 5 times a year. They send an email saying, okay, you gotta take the test. Takes about 15 minutes. So it's a nice thing.
They're good to have,
Yeah.
something to think about.
Yeah.
To necessarily add cost, but it's a growing problem.
It
And,
is, yeah.
I can tell you in the private sector, just this year, I've had cases where people have wired money
Most of the time,
because
the
they
staff,
come in and fake that they're
yeah,
somebody they're not, and they're good.
yeah,
I've
they
seen that.
are. Most of the staff, if they're unsure, they forward it to us or say, hey,
Yep.
could you take a look at this? They're pretty good about that, so.
Yeah, but this is,
Hopefully-
you're at another level beyond the phishing, like they'll actually put an email, it's
QR
fake
codes.
being Melinda.
Oh, yeah, we have that.
Like, you're-
Mhm.
Yeah,
so,
we have that.
Something to think about.
They did it with POs several years ago, created fictitious POs and ordered
Yeah.
cases of whiskey on a school department PO, and then somebody called.
Because that happens all the time.
Yeah, that doesn't look right, and they
It-
call, so we've had that. Yeah.
I definitely check on the US based though, because I know a lot of the US based cybersecurity suites now are preventing a lot of that. And they're built in
Stuff with it. On my, how much was the high school drafting lab project?
I put about $20,000 in the budget for that.
And when might we learn about grant availability?
The application is open currently. It's due in early February. I probably won't know until August, so unfortunately.
Budget time.
It's,
Yeah. So just moving on quickly, we just have a couple of more things. As you, the Board of Ed is aware, several years ago, we cut the curriculum director position, and that position came into my office. And so, as the director of curriculum, my budget's up about 28%, primarily because, if you've heard, we do offer a CNA certification program. For the last 2 years, that's been funded by EWIB, which is the Eastern Workforce Initiative Board. Basically, they will give you seed money to start up programs, and then they phase that out because they want you to sustain the program. I'm actually working with EWIB now on CDA certification for early childhood, and hopefully there'll be some grant funding behind that. Professional development district-wide, the cost of PD has gone up. And then, of course, we have curriculum documents that need to be filled. And then the other expense is our scuba program every year needs to pay for some pool time, which isn't that expensive. And the equipment was already purchased, but the maintenance of the tanks need to be checked every year. So that's the rationale behind the increase in curriculum. And then the three departments that I didn't ask to speak tonight because there's no changes in their budget is the health department under the direction of Shannon Grauer. Security has been maintaining their budget. Greg does a great job with his budget. The ask on the town side is the same every year that it has been for the last several years. And there's no changes in the human resource department. And so I didn't ask their directors to put any budget slide presentation together. And that is the school department's presentation of our budget, and I guess I'll turn it back to you, Chairman Herbert.
Okay, any questions in general, anything you want to cover in particular? I mean, we will be presenting this again to the town. Now, this is a fluid document. The board has 2 more meetings scheduled and a 5th if necessary before we turn it over to you. It's subject to change. You're welcome to ask, and as you go through the numbers line by line, you do have the second version of this budget. If you have any questions on a line, feel free to ask. As we go through it, we're still going through it in detail ourselves. We have not adopted this budget yet because we're still reviewing it. And this is our second iteration of it, and it's subject to change. Obviously, the health insurance is still fluctuating. We still have some questions on it. The liability insurance, and possibly the workers' comp. I have some questions on that. We had questions last week when we met, or the week before when we met, and Bill is really good about getting back to us with his analysis of our questions. He's very good about that, very prompt, and I appreciate that. So, as I say, if you have any questions, either reach out to me or to Melinda, and we will direct them to Bill.
Most, when I back to the special ed, that's one that's been so volatile.
Can you speak up, sir?
The special ed has been the most volatile part of the budget, I think, on the past years. Is it based on current population? Is it based on increasing something in the future? What's the groundwork behind the special pupil services budget?
Dr. Jones.
I mean, it's really the current
Population?
population. We were not expecting some of the students that enrolled and the needs that they have. And like I said before, whoever comes in, we have to provide that service. Period. And
So there's no contingency there. Then it's, I'm just trying to understand, based on today's population, services required, and you're gonna expecting to do the same next year. I think in the past, we've not seen that.
No, you have not.
Never seen that. It's always we always get unpleasantly surprised. Unpleasantly surprised.
So for example, right, 8 paraprofessionals, CNAs and RN increased out of district. That's.
So you have no contingency. Sounds like Bill has no contingency.
I gave mine to Chris.
You know, as we've explained to the Board of Finance, we're about $950,000 over in special education.
Right.
The overall budget, we're still operating in the black, but all we have is $90,000 left to take us to June. And if one of Bill's pump goes, God only knows what that's going to cost. So, you know, we're hoping that we can maintain being in the black, even if it's, you know, $1. But it's likely not to, and we're likely to exceed our budget. Right now, we're still holding our own and still working to close some POs that we have open. We're under a hard freeze, so we're not allowing any unusual expenses to go through, not that we do anyway, but things that if teachers haven't bought them at the beginning of the year, it's our mindset that they don't need it for the second half of the year. So we're taking, and there hasn't been any POs really coming through for the past, I would say, month. So we're holding our own here, but we're very concerned about FY25. And so we were very concerned about building FY26.
But it sounds like we have no contingency built in, even though we know there'll be things that are gonna happen.
I've been here 8 years. You've never had contingency in your budget. It's like flying on a trapeze without a safety net. And it's concerning. But luckily the town has managed to pull through over the years, and we've squeaked by in many cases. Last year we lucked out. Students moved out and we had a surplus. That very rarely happens. It was the first time since I've been here that happened.
Any other questions, concerns? Comments?
I had a couple of comments. And I don't know, Melinda, if you shared with the board or with others, the town's surplus and the situation there. Maybe Bill has over time. You talked about the surplus with this group?
Yes, we have. You mean townwide?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I guess high level, this is one of the key statistics that the auditors look at every year. And they recommend roughly a 15 to 16% surplus ratio. We were, at our last audit around 5. We saw a little bit of improvement in that situation. That's still subject to audit, in large part because of the surplus we ran at the town, largely due to a light winter. and at the school due to things breaking our way for once on the special ed fund. So we're hoping, as of 6/30/24, those numbers, will improve a bit.
Right.
So I guess there's a bit of an encouraging trend there.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't take much, to go the other way.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the lack of a contingency, we made some progress, I think, on the town side in increasing contingency last year. I think we upped it to about 90,000.
90,000.
Which is, that's okay. Now, I guess if you think about that, right, the town budget is a little less than half of what the school budget is. And there's really no contingency, no specifically set aside contingency. Please come out to our town meeting tomorrow and vote for the ordinance that allows us to have our budget meetings earlier if we can. One of the reasons that's so key, little tangent from finance here, it gives us an opportunity to get the budget passed and get the tax bills out in a timely manner every year. Because any delay in getting the tax bills out every year is only heightened, the concern that causes is only heightened by the fact that our surplus is so low. Because we don't have much surplus to fall back on to cover that gap in time.
Thank.
There is still some monies in the non-lapsing account, correct?
Yes. Yep, we have about 43 or 4,000 of the original non-lapsing. Hadn't looked at the new one in a bit.
So Bill, thank you for that. My recollection was 5.3%.
Yeah.
And I only bring that a little over 5, and I only bring that up here so folks understand, our job, the 4 of us plus 2, is to go through the town budget, set a mill rate that we think is appropriate, right? Have that go to referendum. There's a lot of history on those not passing on the first time, although last year it did, which is great. But there's a lot of pressure around the surplus, and below 5, I'm told the state will come in and begin to run the town. That scares me to death. I don't want the state running our town. I want the people in our town running our town. So let me bring it up so that you all know that we support the school as much as we support the town. It's just a reality of what's in front of us, the choices that we have to make. Everyone's rallied that has budgets to help improve that surplus. Bill, you think it's getting better? I mean, that's been the trajectory that we're on.
Right.
And it's important that we do that. We may not get to 16 where they're targeting, but getting back up into high single digits and eventually approaching, low double digits is an important place to be. So that if we don't have contingency, things happen and you actually are in the red. We have a way to support ourselves and not have to rely on the state to do that for us. So that's the only reason why I bring that up. So folks kind of know at least the most recent history behind the pressures that we're under.
So I think one of the debates that we had last budget season, and I know we spent a little while on it, was us adding monies to the people services budget, which I think it was like a $200,000 number, right? We were gonna add $200,000 to our people services number on top of the budget that was already there. And it was, well, do we pad our budget as a contingency? And at this point, we don't really know that it would have made a difference, but would it have made that big of a difference when we're talking about the people services number we're talking about? I feel like we're being very fair to the taxpayers with the way our budget is, because there is no padding in it, right? There was no padding in our budget last year. We didn't, Steve has said, do you have a contingency for people services? We don't have that contingency because I feel that it's better for the townsfolk that we don't, because if we do, we can take that, last year was $400,000 and we can keep it for our discretion. And I think it's as good as that is for the school. I think it's better for the town's taxpayers to have control of that money, better for the Board of Finance to have that control of those funds, so that it doesn't look like we're padding our budget and making it look like we're just shoving money into our non-lapsing account because we can. Again, for the purposes of the town surplus, I think at this point, it only makes sense to do it that way. And leave it like that.
I think this is me personally, okay, that's nothing, this is me personally. I think our biggest problem is gonna be the success of last year of a 2 mil increase. People are gonna remember that, okay? And I'm worried of what we're gonna have to, certainly. I come from a family of teachers. My father was a college professor. My wife was a special ed teacher for 43 years and still teaching part-time. My daughter now teaches at the school, so I gotta be careful there, so I don't get in trouble at home. But I'm nervous going into this because, like you say, this workshop is very helpful, okay? But in all honesty, we understand exactly what's going on. You know, this is my umpteenth budget meeting that I've done from selectmen to Board of Finance before to now. We understand what's going on and the needs. But unfortunately, in our community, they saw 2 mil last year, okay, and give credit to the ladies and the people that pushed hard to get that through, because it was needed. What worries me now is going into this one, that I just don't see that happening. And the things like maintenance, okay, and special ed and the regular classrooms, it's gonna be a tough sell, and I want to be upfront and prepare that there's not gonna be a 2 mil increase coming, you know, and we can put it out there, but I think this town, especially, am I correct, it's reval, right? That's gonna affect it, you know? So I think we all need to be prepared and take hard looks at the numbers. I certainly can understand everything that was said to me today. I've grown up with it. But it's gonna be a hard sell this year, and I just want people to be prepared that when they come in front of us, we're gonna have to make some pretty hard decisions to, you know, to take care of the community. I always tell people, one of the most, you know, sobering days of my life was my first day as the first selectman. Now it's not 5 people in my family. I've got 9,000 people that are asking me to do the right thing. So we're gonna have that same situation going into this one. What's good for you and what's good for the town. And, you know, I just want that to be upfront when we sit down, because they look at us and say, oh, you're cutting this, or you're saying take X amount away from the school. Not that we want, we'd give you everything you want if you could. I mean, I was the one that told you to keep the 450,000, you know, if you remember that, if you painted the lockers and you didn't. So you got trouble until those lockers are painted down. You know, I'm just saying, it's gonna be very hard for us this year. And I appreciate being invited, and we listen to everything, and I understand everything, because I've grown up with it. I've known Bill for a long time, and I know what a great job he's done to keep this facility working. But it's gonna be a tough on the 6 of us going into this budget season. So I look forward to working with everybody, but it's gonna be some hard choices.
And Brian, thank you for that. And to build on that, that's why the vote's so important that Bill was
That's right.
talking about, because if we move the date, that just gives us more room
Right.
between when the referendum happens and when the tax collector actually starts collecting cash, because at the end of the day, the cash collections is what really matters. So that's an important town meeting, and important to give us that runway that if it doesn't pass, we go back through and loop on the budget.
I just want to say, I'm not going to speak for the whole board. I appreciate you guys showing up and coming here with an open mind and open ears. It really feels like we're all working together finally, and I appreciate that. And I also know that, you know, that most of the stuff that's in this budget is, we don't really have much of a choice on it.
Well, that's why I said in the
Yeah,
beginning,
yeah.
you know, realistically, you can do the pluses and the minuses. You need 956,000 and 460 is obligated.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a lot of room to cut.
Yeah.
So we understand that, you know, but that's how I've done a lot of budgets in my time,
Right.
$1 million budgets. Bottom line is, you got X amount coming in. You gotta do a budget around what your revenues are coming in, and we gotta go from there, you know?
But it just feels like there's more listening involved, and I think we're listening more to you guys as well, but it's more of a two-way, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you. I appreciate it too. I mean, this is something that we want to continue. If you have any suggestions, how we could do it better or present it better. I know we have to go through the whole dog and pony show again for the town. How can we reach out to the town? Any suggestions would be welcome from that. Points to emphasize. We want to reach the people. I think we did our communications committee, subcommittee did a great job last year. I think they were instrumental in getting the budget passed. I mean, it was a huge ask of the people of Thompson to put through a 2 mil increase last year. And your Heather and Kristen and Danielle did a fabulous job in getting the word out and our need out. And hopefully I understand that it's going to be a rough year again. I don't think we can expect that again this year. People don't really understand that increasing the grand list and their valuations that their houses went up, but their taxes don't necessarily go up as their house valuation goes up. It's a hard sell. It's going to be a hard sell. At this point, I'll take, if there are any citizens' comments on Zoom, I will take citizens' comments. No? Okay.
There's 2 chats down below.
In the beginning.
Okay. I'll second.
Undebatable.
That was good.
No, okay. Motion to adjourn?
Yep, there's that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.